set their father to draw their friends closer to them. And this is something that we see unraveling before our eyes, that a person has friends and they have parents. And because their friends are so close to them, or because the meaningful relationships in their minds are the relationships with their friends, they're willing to uphold those relationships at the expense of the rights and love of their parents. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says these are one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, that a person is unable to prioritize the different types of relationships. Now, we've been talking about the rights of parents, we've been talking about the rights of seniors. The question now is, how can we teach our children the rights of the parents without coming across as, self-serving or opportunistic? Because somebody could say, I'm not going to go to my child and say, listen, hey, you have to respect me because of X, Y, and Z. You have to respect me because that's what the hadith says. Although a person is entitled to do that, that's not an effective way of carrying out our duties. How should we do it? The ulama explain that the best way to have our rights fulfilled is by us fulfilling the rights of others. So, one way is having ta'aleem in the house. I sit down with my children and together we read the words of the Prophet ﷺ where the rights of the parents are spoken. That's an effective way of educating our children on the rights of the parents. So, by way of example, I sit together, we take a book like Riyadus Salihin, or we take a book that we're comfortable with, and we go through the section about the rights of parents. And we'll all take turns. My son will read, my daughter will read, I will read. And then I'll tell my child that, look, a way of understanding this is if your grandfather or your grandmother, my parents, are here, this is what I would do. By emphasizing in the third person, the child doesn't feel as though it's being forced down on them, while at the same time they're being educated. I've spoken to people, youth myself, who've told me that when my parents come to me and they're upset and they're yelling and screaming at me and telling me about these ahadith, I don't feel convinced. But when I'm growing up and I hear these ahadith playing in the background, meaning it's always being told, not at the spur of the moment. One of the biggest mistakes we make as parents is when something goes wrong, at that moment we try our best to correct it. The ulama explained that change happens when everything is calm. We just had dinner together, we had ice cream together, we're having a good time. We're sitting down and we're reading the hadith. And I talk about my experiences with my parents and my parents' experience with their parents. And like this, we're modeling them for when it does happen. Now, my daughter comes and disrespects me, my son comes and disrespects me, then we can have a reminder that, remember, we spoke about this the other day. As opposed to, I see her doing something like, hey, what are you doing? Don't you know Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And she's like, I never heard this before. So, the key to having our children learn about the adab of the rights of the parents is when everything is calm and composed, we sit together very lovingly, we repeat the ahadith so that they see how I'm treating my parents. They see how I'm treating my seniors. And they will learn by that as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspire us to be an example for our children and to be an example for our youth as well. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah, after the remaining sunan, we will have our weekly hadith session. Everyone is requested to participate.